In this video, we're going to talk about the keywords continue and break. Both of these keywords are meant to change how a loop executes. It causes the loop to not do what it normally would do. So let's take a look at this first example that uses continue, and we see it right here. So I have an int called sum and an int called number. Number starts at 0. We have a while loop that's going to count using number from 0 till 19. And right there is the number plus plus that increases it by 1 each time we go through here. Now I have a test here. I'm going to come back and talk about the test, but first I want to look at what the rest of this does. This line adds the number to the sum. So the sum is an accumulator variable. We've talked about that in previous videos. Okay, so we're going to be adding up the numbers from 0 to 19, basically, is what this should do. And then I have a print statement here that's going to print out the number and print out the current sum in the loop while it's happening so that we can watch what happens. However, right here I have an if statement. Okay, and this if statement says if the number is equal to 10 or if the number is equal to 11, it has this word continue. So what does continue do? Continue says, hey, no matter what you're doing in this loop, I want you to exit this iteration of the loop and start the loop over again on the next number. Okay, so it's going to increase the number. If it's 10 or 11, it's going to say continue. It's going to skip these two lines where we add number to the sum, and it's going to skip printing out the number and the sum, and then it will go back and continue the loop. So let's watch this in action. I'll hit run, and we see the results here. And if we scroll through these, we see after 1, the sum is 1, then we add 2 to it to get 3, add 3 to get 6, add 4 to get 10. But look what happens when we get up 8, we have 36, at 9 we have 45. Where's 10? Okay, when the number was equal to 10, we hit continue, so it did not add 10 to the sum, and it did not print these out. Continue made it skip the rest of the iteration of that loop. So it skipped 10, it skipped 11, and then when it got to 12, it added 12 onto the 45 that we had before to get 57, and it continued. So we ended up adding up all the numbers up through 20, 1 through 20, with the exception of 10 and 11. 10 and 11 did not get included because the continue statement told it to skip these two lines, but continue the loop. The other keyword we want to talk about is the break keyword. The break tells a loop to stop as well, but the break keyword makes the loop completely end. It doesn't just cause it to go to the next iteration of the loop. It says, okay, break me completely out of this loop. Go to the next line of code. To illustrate that, I'm going to add one line down here to say done so that we can see this will execute ultimately. This is the magic number game that we did in an earlier video. Guess the magic number, except we changed some things up. It's still picking a random number from 0 to 100, asking the user to make a guess. But look at the while loop. It says while true. Now, normally if you put while and the condition inside is true, is there ever any way for this to become false? There is not. True is always true. So the while loop will continue to execute no matter what, and we have an infinite loop. And we talked about infinite loops a little bit, and we know that they're not necessarily a good thing. So let's look at how the program is changed to accommodate this. So we ask the user for their guess. That's no different. If the guess is equal to the number, we say, yes, you've guessed the proper number, and then we have this keyword break. And break says, end this loop right now, and go on to the next line of code that comes after the loop. All right, so this break ends up being what makes our loop end, because while true would never end otherwise. So let's go ahead and run this. Make sure that it works like we expect it to. 50, too low. 75, too high. 65 is too high. Let's go 60. 57. 58. 59 is the answer. Okay. All right. Yes, the number is 59. And the loop did end because once I got it correct, it says, yes, the number is 59. And then it breaks out of the loop. Now, there's a little bit of controversy with that. Some programmers think break and continue are just fine, and some people say there's probably a better way to write it. If you have to use break or continue, there is probably a better way to write that code. And I would say that I'm one of those people that believe that. If you have to use a break or you have to use a continue, there's probably a more logical way to write your code. And if you go back and look at the original, where we were actually testing to see while the number wasn't equal to the guess, that's probably the better way to do it, because you don't have the possibility that this loop ever becomes an infinite loop. Technically, the break prevents that from happening here. But this isn't as logical and easy to read for the person reading this code. They have to figure out somewhere in here where the loop actually decides to execute, and the condition isn't as readily apparent as it is if we would have written it in there to begin with. So break and continue are statements you can use to exit. Continue exits the iteration of the loop. Break exits the loop completely. But always think if there's a better way to write one. If you discover you need a break or continue, think about if there's another way you can rearrange the code to not need those.